Tarrasch variation of the French defence. Okay, so e4, e6, d4, d5, knight d2. Okay, so this is a Tarrasch, which is also a very popular line for white to play against the French. Okay, so the idea is that white defends his e4 pawn, and he also he blocks the queen from defending d4 pawn, but he avoids moves like bishop b4, since after bishop b4 white can just play c3. Also this knight d2 line move, there's also ideas of knight coming to e2 and knight coming to f3, where white's going to securely defend his d4 pawn. So there's nothing to worry about. White doesn't need to worry about losing a pawn. Okay, so knight f6. This is the main line, which I'd play. Okay, so blacks are immediately attacking e4 pawn and now e5. So this makes sense. White wants to play this anyway, this move, and so when he attacks the knight at the same time, this is ideally what he wants to do. So now knight back to d7. We see this move played quite a lot. Knight back to d7. It's also played in the classical. So after knight c3, knight f6, e5, knight back to d7. So a pretty similar position. And now white tends to play with bishop to d3. Okay, c5, c3, knight c6, knight e2. And now black can just take, and play f6. Okay, so the idea of f6 is to immediately threaten to win a pawn on e5, and if black doesn't really play this move, then he can get squashed very quickly. So this move is necessary. So after f6, he takes f6, and now knight takes f6. Another move is knight to f4. This move is very sharp, but if black knows what he's doing, then black gets the better position, I believe. So after knight takes d4, defending the e6 pawn, queen to h5 check. If g6, and white can just take it anyway, since after he captures white can take the black rook. So we go knight, there we go king to e7, pawn takes f6 check, and now knight takes f6. If he plays it this way, then it's not as good, because now after the check you can just move your king. So this would actually be a mistake if you're throwing the queen. The best way to actually the move that white needs to play is knight g6 check first. So I'm a bit unfamiliar with this line, since I play this on the black side and hardly ever get it, since I guess white knows this is bad. So after h takes g6, now white plays e takes f6 check now. Since after queen takes rook, then knight takes e5, just pretty much going to be winning for black. So e takes f6 check is needed, knight takes f6, and now queen takes h8, now king f7. Okay, so this move protects the g6 pawn, but also means that this knight can't move. If knight was to go to f3, then bishop b4 check just picks up the queen. So that's why the queen comes back to h4. Also attacking e5 knight, the knight on d4, sorry. Now black plays e5. So using these central pawns, and after knight coming to f3, there's a couple of exchanges. Knight takes f3 check, pawn takes f3, bishop f5, bishop takes f5, g takes f5. So black's got rid of these double pawns. It's got three very good central pawns. And after bishop to g5, it's a nice ways that white. Nice way that black can play now. As you play, first of all, queen a5 check, king f1, and now a g6. Okay, so after white takes on f6, you may be thinking, oh, he's just winning a piece, so why did black play g6? But then black can play queen a6 check, so king has to move, and then queen takes f6, and I've had this in a game against Paul Wallace at the Gatwick Premier. The end result was a draw. Paul actually played Queen to A4. After Queen takes F6, King takes F6. Now we'll play Rook to C1. Then after this, I guess Black can just play. Could just play Bishop to D6, or you can play B6, Bishop C5. There's a number of ways Black can play, and it's quite hard for White's rooks to actually, to do anything particularly. These pawns are going to be very strong, so that's why Paul opted to keep the queens on. Play Queen A4, and now I've played Queen C6, since Queen's threatening to come to D7 check, picking up a couple of pawns. So Queen C6, I'm happy to swap off queens, since after takes, Rook C1, just C5, and now White's rooks aren't going to be able to use the C file. So if he ever plays a B4 move, I can just bypass the pawn with C4. Later on, I'm going to protect this pawn, play D4, and it's going to be very good for Black. Okay, so that's why Queen went back to B3, so it's a good move. Threatening Rook C1. These two pawns are under pressure, so I play Bishop C5, Rook C1, B6, Queen C3, Queen D6, and this position was fine for me. I later could play A5. I did notice about this game when I was looking through it that maybe after Queen B3, maybe Bishop H6 is also an interesting idea, since it stops the Rook coming to C1. Okay, so now Rook D1, then I guess King E6 makes sense, protecting the pawn. And if White tries doing any of this, just doubling up on the D file, Black can simply just protect the pawns. Maybe play Rook D7, protecting the B pawn. And I mean, how's White going to break through in this position? Okay, actually, you might be able to play Rook C3. Maybe Queen back to D6, or even in this position you could try. I was looking at E4, but you don't particularly want to play E4 unless you've got a plan, because otherwise you're going to allow White to get rid of one of his not so good pawns on your better pawns. So, okay, maybe you might be able to play it this way as well. Rook to D8, Rook to D1. This position, so Rook to D8, Rook to D3, and then maybe King F6, and now Rook to D1, D4. This might also be, I don't know, might be a better way to play it. Actually stops the Rook's actually getting onto the C file. And now the King's not pinned to the pawn, so E6 could also, E4 could also be a possibility at some point. But yeah, I mean, you don't particularly need to know this line as much. You've got to know sort of the theory up to here. You'll get a good position. So White, you'll find that White tends not to play this unless he thinks that you don't really know the line very well. Okay, so he takes F6 is the main line. You should get played against you almost always. So Knight takes F6, Knight to F3, Bishop to D6, Castle, Queen to C7. So the idea of Queen C7 is it stops the White bishop from coming to F4. And now there's a variety of ways White tries and plays this position. He might sometimes play G3 with the idea of Bishop F4, or he might play Bishop to G5. So immediately attacking the knight, and after Castle, Bishop back to H4. So now he wants to play Bishop into G3 to solve the bishops. But an interesting line, these sort of positions is just Bishop D7, and after Bishop G3, Bishop E8. Notice, okay, so bishops might come off, Rook may come to C1, but now bishops come to H5, and Black's improved his position a lot, and now he's ready to get rid of his bad bishop. Actually, his bishop's on a very good square and sort of become a good bishop now, but he can exchange it if he wants to. So Black's doing fine here. Another way to try to play is G3, so the idea of Bishop F4 now. and now castle, bishop f4, knight to e4, and these positions tend to be quite sharp, but I always think black gets the better position, because after bishop can't take on e4, because d takes e4, and okay, so if it takes, queen takes, now the rook's attacking the knight, so say if king g2, and I also think that black gets a good position in these lines as well. You might be able to play bishop d7, the same idea, bring bishop around. You might even sack his rook on f3, depending that he's got a good enough attack to follow up with. Okay, so these lines also okay. Another interesting line actually for black to play is queen b6. This is a line I was playing recently actually. No idea of queen b6. Now that after the bishop moves, we can play queen takes b2. Just win a pawn. So after b3, and now e5. This is quite interesting. So black wants to. You can play queen back to c7 here as well. This is also another line where you tried to prove this b3 move's a weakness. I don't know. Bishop just seems to help bishop b2. Okay, if you want to keep your bishop on, then queen b6, queen c7 is a good idea. Otherwise, I don't know. It's hard to say. I haven't really played this way as black. White normally wants to stick a knight on e5. So if you let him do that, I think white's going to be fine. So black wants to try to prevent that as much as possible. Okay, after e5, this is also very interesting. Can be quite sharp as well. So these tend to lose quite sharp positions after this variation. Since but black, black has a lot of its pieces tend to be quite active. But okay, so say bishop b3 and then queen d6, and rook c1, castle maybe. Actually, now it just runs into bishop c5. Well, in this position, you might be able to just take on h2 or knight g4 or whatever. So maybe rook to c1's probably not so good. I don't quite know how white's supposed to play this position, but the only thing I don't like about this position is black's going to end up with an isolated pawn, so being a d pawn. And also, his position is very open, so it's quite easy for white to attack him. After in this position, rook b1 might just be the correct move. But I was just thinking bishop a3 looks quite interesting as well. Just sack the exchange, since this bishop's a killer. White can't castle, and in such a position, this could be very dangerous. So say if I know king's probably have to come to f7 because queen e5 checks a threat. Knight f4, maybe rook e1 check. It's hard to see how black's going to play. So king f7 looks like a good idea. Maybe knight f4, and it's hard to defend this pawn. Maybe bishop d7, bishop c6 might be an idea. Rook e1, rook e8 maybe. I don't know. It's interesting. Maybe black's doing fine. He might be escaping. Okay, so in this position, rook b1 might be the better move for white. But I don't particularly like his lines because it just looks a bit risky. So I'd just play my queen back to c7. Okay, and if white plays bishop b4, then we've improved bishop to g5. Then we've improved slightly since the knight c3 ideas aren't as good as they're not protected. So white surely has to play bishop b2 to justify this b3 move. And then probably castles, and now white wants to try to play for this e5 square, so maybe rook e1, put his knight somewhere, so maybe knight c3, a6, stopping the knight coming to p5, and now maybe rook e1. But still, the problem with the knight is now it blocks in the bishop from, so now knight can't even come to e5 yet anyway. I don't know, so this position's it's interesting, and if you do want to play like this, I'd advise you to look into it. Okay, my instinct just tells you to play bishop d7, bishop b8, and bishop h5. that would be my typical plan. It always is in these sort of lines to improve this bishop. Or I'd be looking to play an e5 breakaway move, but this does look okay. So after takes maybe is has white got any nasty tricks with knight takes d5? Don't know. Okay, it's knight takes d5. Then we're just going to recapture the bishop. So after bishop check, king here, knight takes. What's going on in this position looks very complicated. Maybe queen h5, attacking the knight, attacking h7, and after knight f6, that'd be bishop takes f6. G takes f6, maybe defending. Okay, so they can play queen takes h2, or maybe even rook somewhere. I'll probably play rook c1 actually. Stop, protection of the bishop, and it's also got to protect g7. So maybe to do that takes, and I don't know. His position looks bad for black. Okay, so maybe e5 doesn't seem to be working straight away. But you could certainly plan to play e5 with bishop d7, rook e8, and then e5 in these positions. Okay, so this is one way to play against a Tarrasch. Another line that I quite like playing is knight c6, which is known as the Guimard. So we're attacking the d4 pawn, so knight f3 is the best move. A lot of players play c3 just because they don't really know what they're doing, and c3 doesn't look like a bad move. But now the problem with c3 is it allows e5. And after takes, knight f3, takes, knight f6, bishop to c4, queen to f5, queen to b3, bishop to e6. These sort of lines. Bishop e6 at the moment. Okay, it's queen b3 now. Then you might be able to play knight a5. Let's have a look. Knight a5. Can you get away with this? Takes king e7. Okay, now the queen can't protect the bishop, and after queen check, we can take, and then the queen defends the knight. Okay, so that's the bit. Okay, if they castle, then you can play bishop e6, and now if they play queen b3, we can castle. Knight f4 might also, knight f5 also looks like an option. Maybe there's a check or two. Break castle, and now takes. Anyway, as you can see from these lines, that black has a very good position. There's a lot of pressure applied to this weakness. Isolated pawn d4. His knight a5 tricks earlier on also might cause white some problems. But anyway, this is not the main way to play as white. Knight f3, knight f6, attacking e4, e pawn, e5, knight d7. This is typical again of the French. And now best line is bishop e2. Okay, so bishop e2. Another line is bishop d3, or as bishop b5 as knight b3. So bishop e2, f6, e takes f6, queen takes f6, castle. Okay, so castle's not actually the best move, and I'll show you why. It looks like a logical response, but now bishop d6 might even be winning the d4 pawn. Actually, so you get a lot of people just play c3, and after bishop d6, then they castle, and then we castle, and then after rook e1, then the idea of knight f1. Now e5, and I think black's white's just got a rubbish position. They can't allow e4, so they have to take. Now knight can take on e5. And we see that the knight can't take because of queen takes f2 check. So yeah, we see that white's got problems now. Okay, so knight might come to f1. Bishop g4, queen takes d5 check, but now it's king h8, and black's going to get a lot of play for the pawn. We see that rook's going to come to d8, and there's going to be ideas that knight takes f3. So say if knight e3, maybe rook d8, and now I've got ideas that knight takes f3 check, and bishop takes h2 check, winning the queen. So yeah, this line isn't so good for white. So after this, the critical moves knight to f1 straight away, which a lot of players don't actually know. I've had a lot of games where they just castle or play c3, and this knight f1 move it's quite tricky to find straight away. Now bishop d6, like knight e3. So the idea is this move is not only is the d pawn protected, but now e5 can't be played because the d pawn's hanging. So black castles, white castles, queen comes to g6 to make room for the knight, to come to f6, c4, knight f6, c5, bishop f4. So yeah, this is standard position in the main line. So this is position you should get if white knows what he's doing. And after bishop d3, you could try queen h5 or just queen e8, depending what you prefer. Queen h5 might probably suits me a bit more. So knight takes d4 might be a threat, and after knight takes d4 is going to be mate on h2. Okay, so that's the main line, which is, as you should see, quite hard to find. Okay, another idea is bishop d3. This is more of a gambit line. I mean, you can play knight b4 here, and after bishop e2, c5, c3, knight c6, and this just transposes back into one of the Tarrasch lines. You want to stay in the Guimard, then play f6. Okay, and now there's knight g5. This is a gambit line. Okay, if you take, then just queen h5 check is going to be killing. So knight takes e5 is the critical move, and after takes, now you can take on g5, because now after the check, you can play king to d7. Knight comes to f3 to defend e pawn, also attack the g pawn. And now g6. So notice that bishop takes g6 doesn't work, because pawn takes, queen takes, bishop check wins the queen. So queen, and if queen takes g5 maybe, but then I think black's just doing fine here. It's a very good position. And okay, so after g6, queen g4. But then again, still in this position, I think black's doing totally fine as well. Okay, approach to simply defend the g5 pawn, or even play bishop g7, attacking the e pawn. Yeah, it really depends whichever one you like. You can even try later on playing knight e7, knight f5. Okay, so this isn't very good for white. Black knows what to do. It's just this knight takes e5. I guess it's quite hard to find, because after takes, and black's just getting killed this position. After some knight move to f3, and then bishop takes g5. Check. Okay, so another line is bishop to a6 to b5, but now white can play a6, takes, knight b3, and the idea of this move is to play it's after c5, and maybe knight a5, and it looks like black is probably in a bit of trouble here, since his only move seems like knight to b8 to prevent the knight coming to c6. But actually, black can play c6 himself, and if knight takes c6, and then white's losing after queen b6, since his knight's got no squares. Okay, so this is a line. c5 is quite good. It tends to be met by c4. a5 is probably a bit better. The idea is to play a4, kicking the knight back, and also a5 prevents the knight coming to a5. So a4 is normally played, but now it's bishop a6 can be quite annoying. And if a4 isn't played, so say if white was to castle, then a4, now back to d2, c5, c3, maybe bishop a6, rook e1, or you can maybe play f6, f5, or depends, maybe just bishop a6, rook e1, just take and play c5 maybe. As long as you don't allow queen takes a4, you might not be able to get away with it, but I don't know. I think it's probably best to leave your bishop on c8 for the time being, since rook e1 only helps white. So maybe just take and play c5 here straight away. Okay, so white tends to get good position from these. The black tends to get an okay position from these as well. So knight b3. This is another alternative.
Now let's play a5, and after bishop b5, knight comes back to a7. Knight bishop back to d3, and then black can just start pushing white back as well. So yeah, this is also fine for black. You might try a4 moves. Oops, a4. So you might try a4 moves. But I guess we get on with our plan. f6 takes. Bishop may come to b5. We might just play knight back to a7 again, or you could just continue like this. If he takes, it's going to be fine. Our bishop can to a6. We can get these double pawns of c5, so it's not a problem. If you do get a position where bishop comes to g5 in any sort of line to queen on f6, you can either play queen g6 or queen f7. So they're both fine. You should protect the e pawn. So yeah, that's pretty much it on. These are the two lines I'd actually recommend against the Tarrasch. As I said on the knight c3 video, I do recommend you do look at and learn one of these d takes e4 lines if you do want to improve with the French, since you can play this against both the Tarrasch and knight c3, the classical. And after knight takes e4, you can either play Rubinstein, where you play like this: knight d7, knight f3, knight g6, bishop e7, which is very solid. Takes. A lot of pieces tend to come off. And you try to play b6 at some point, bishop b7. Well, the way I probably prefer to play is bishop to d7. And so after knight f3, bishop c6, bishop d3, knight d7, castle, knight gf6, bishop to g3. And now you don't want to allow white to move his knight, since your bishop's not going to be able to capture a piece. And your bishop's going to be vulnerable to c4, d5 ideas. So now you can get rid of the knight. Queen takes and now plays c6. So you can play a sort of Scandinavian sort of structure. But you got rid of that bad bishop. And so now maybe bishop e7. And black's doing fine in these positions as well. Play queen a5, and it's very hard to break black's position down. Okay, the only other one which I've played before the World Championships in the under 16s last year is I actually played bishop e7 here, which is the burn variation. So after knight to f3, knight to f6. The idea is you want to recapture the bishop, and after bishop d3, knight d7, bishop g5, just c5. And after takes, you just take. You can actually take that this way in this line, but so against bishop knight takes, you can just play bishop takes. And if he plays, say c3, then we can play c5 takes, and now bishop takes. Here's the idea of the burn variations. Now it allows you to recapture the pawn with knight takes c5, but keeping the bishop on f6, which is pretty active. So these lines are quite interesting as well. So I do recommend that you take time to look at any of these lines, any of these d takes e4 lines, as they could be very useful to know. Especially good if you want to just get a solid position out of the opening, and they offer good drawing chances, especially against these lines are very favourable if you're playing against a lot stronger player. You just want to get to a solid position and to make it hard for them, for your opponent to break you down. So anyway, that concludes our video on the Tarrasch. I will be doing the next video on the exchange and other lines as well. Okay, I'll see. Thanks for watching. Bye.